And now we move to Luke, all in the same kind of category. Our theme is treasure this week. Luke 20 and 21, parts of them. While all the people were listening, Jesus said to his disciples, "Beware of the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men shall receive a greater judgment." He looked up and saw rich people putting their gifts into the collection chest. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. He said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in all she had to live on." The word of the Lord. My husband likes to make fun of me, but frugality is built into my DNA. Coming from a home that really wasn't very wealthy, my mother relied on a whole bunch of different ways for us to get by. Store bargains, coupons. Remember those little green stamps? Green stamps? That S&H stamps, they were wonderful, right? Thrift stores, yard sales, bazaars, that kind of thing. We never really felt in need, but we never felt poor. And we didn't have a lot of money at all. Now, when I was married at the very early age of 19, I became the manager of all the household money, and I had to really learn how to stretch a dollar. And for those of you who have been there, tuna fish was cheap then, 42 cents a can, and noodles, right? Cream of mushroom soup was a staple, and then you would get a big chicken and figure out how many meals could you get out of an entire chicken. We also coveted yard sales, thrift stores, and we grew our own vegetables. I could stockpile the vegetables. One of the interesting things we learned in Maryland and in Minnesota were the trash leave-outs. The night before, a few nights before trash pickup, people would leave things on the curb they no longer wanted, or they had purchased something new replacing it. Like you get a patio set, a new one. What do you do with the old one? You put it on the curb, right? How many are familiar with this? Do you see it now? Okay, we see it now still, right? But we had dumps and recycle centers in Maryland and in Minnesota. So large broken trash items weren't necessarily left on the street in those early days, but discarded furniture was. And by dumpsters, discarded furnitures. In Minnesota, people would leave a sign on the item and it typically said, "Free to good home." I love that. That was so enticing to me. I just thought that was great. So I love to pick trash, okay, on the curb and next to a dumper. I'm a trash picker, okay? And you know why? Because recycling is at its finest here. You leave it out for someone else who could use it. Now, I can't tell you how many items I have found for this church. In fact, this last week I was walking by a dumpster, truly, and it looks like the model home in our neighborhood was discarding good things. And so I called Bruce on the phone and said, "Bruce, I need your truck right now." And so we went and we picked up an enormous ficus tree like this, but much bigger. It was just sitting there next to the dumpster, a beautiful one. So you see, it's amazing what we consider to be treasure. It's amazing. To me, recycled goods, previously owned by someone else, they sort of leave a mark of love on them. And to me, passing around items with your friends and neighbors that you no longer need is a way of sharing love. It's treasure to me. So what's your treasure? What is Big Cove's treasure? That's what our biblical lesson is about today. There were 3 scriptures we heard a moment ago, one from the book of Deuteronomy, one from the book of Mark, and one from the book of Luke, all with somewhat similar messages. Now, David's reading today came from the book of Deuteronomy, and its focus was on God's commandment to not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward our needy neighbors. It was made quite clear we should open our hands, willingly giving enough to meet needs, whatever needs may be. So the question that scripture was asking us today is, are we ready to obey God's commandment to give willingly to the needs of the community? It's a good question. The passage that Gail read from the book of Matthew felt like it could have jumped off the pages of the famous Charles Dickens classic, The Christmas Carol. Don't hoard your money. Don't put all your value in money, because when the time comes, you can't take it with you. This scripture, though, was also written in command language in Greek. Command language. The Deuteronomy passage was written in Hebrew with command language. Command language in the Bible is to be taken very seriously. These are not suggestions, but direct commands. And this passage commands that we do not ever store up treasures for ourselves on earth. The scripture refers to temporary earthly rewards. And Jesus uses the example of objects eaten by moths. Did you hear that in the very beginning? Eaten by moths or corroded by rust. Things that can fade away. That's an interesting example. Why do you think they used it? It was very important to their time period. In that time period, cloth was really expensive. So were things forged out of metal. So articles of clothing, they were so valuable that sometimes you'd pass them down generations if they could last. And they were passed down to your children. And objects that were created out of metal were so valuable, they were often buried to keep thieves from stealing them. So don't hoard, instead share. And the idea of rewards coming to you through acts of service and good works and alms sharing was really common in Judaism. Referring to Deuteronomy, give to those in need and not stockpile what you have. You see, friends, Jesus wants us to understand what people treasure becomes their guiding light in their entire life. Be guided by your heart, he says. In ancient days, the heart is seen as the whole being. The whole being, your whole inner person. When they say the word heart, that's what they mean. Everything, your whole essence. Follow your whole essence to God. So the question we ask from this scripture is, which will rule us, worldly wealth or the things of God? Good question. Then the third scripture that I read. Jesus has been teaching his disciples about some systems of social injustice, inequality. He was painting a pretty stark picture. And then we come to this verse about the scribes. Now, the first few verses are a warning against the teachers of the law, at least to those who wear expensive robes and show off how much they put in the treasury, ones who fake sincerity and they use their positions for power. Not all of them, but some, and quite a few in his day. The Greek word used here for robe, that specific Greek word in this specific passage used for robe, signifies that this was the type of robe that one wears for a banquet or a prodigal son's return. Priestly garments. A banquet in the first century was a social event where the best seats in the house and the best food were reserved for those who were wealthy. So we know who the wealthy could have been in that time period. And don't forget the cloth merchants too, right? Some of the metal merchants, those were also very wealthy. But who were the vulnerable in the first century? Call out who you think were the most vulnerable in the first century. Widows. Great. Who else? Say again? Orphans, yes. Who else? The workers in the fields. Slaves. The what? Shepherds, absolutely, yes.
Those struck by disease, like
leprosy, sick people, people who are physically ill. Okay, what else? We're missing two. Women, yes, that even weren't widows. Women.
Yeah.
The poor, it all fits in that category. Ones with mental health issues, seeing as maybe demon-possessed. And one more that we don't think about, but we talk about the woman, right? Prostitutes are good, absolutely, they were completely, but fatherless children. So single moms and their children, the children, they didn't have any worth, any wealth at all. They had no security, they had no worth. But Jesus was very, very aware of them. When Jesus was continuing to teach his disciples, he became distracted from his teaching and noticed the givers to the treasury. The treasury is where you put your tithes, your offering box, okay? What would it have looked like? The saproth was a horn-shaped kind of receptacle that's made out of metal that you'd put your coins into to pay your tithe. There's a different receptacle you put in to take care of the poor, but this was for your tithing. The larger the gift, remember big coins, right? Coins, the louder the sound produced. So when the coins hit the bottom of an empty one, clink, clink. When they hit other coins, clink, clink, clink. Loud, right? The smaller the gift, the smaller the sound. Jesus saw and probably heard what was happening. The story we read today is not a story to celebrate the widow and her happy giving. It's not. That's why I read it just the way I did. But instead, think of it this way. Highlight the leaders and how they devour the women's homes. The remark from Jesus continues the thought of the widows' homes being stolen, literally, by the church taking their alms and their money. What did Jesus say in Matthew 21:13? The temple should be a house of prayer, and instead is a den of robbers. In our scripture today, I want you to imagine that Jesus could be pointing out the abuse of power. The woman, even though she truly gave all that she had for the upkeep of the temple into the treasury saproth, she's putting herself last and God in the temple first. Not a bad thing, except she's practicing no self-care, and the temple leaders do not notice, nor do they care for her. But the people noticed the leaders as they wore fancy robes, and their coins would make a voluminous sound in the metal pot when they were dropped in. But no one pays attention to the widow except Jesus. Remember that widows would have been identified by what they wore. It would have been really obvious that she was a widow. And by the clothing that they wear, they're already assumed to be poor. And the fact that she gives everything that she has, though, begs me to ask the question, why? Why is no one caring for her, and why is she tithing at all? Widowhood is not a fixed identity. No woman is born a widow. The truths of the lives of the characters in this text begs us to examine what caused the church and the temple system to fail so radically as to allow a widow to give more than those that are wealthy. Did they treasure or value the coffers more than the widow? So third scripture asks us to think of this question. What is our treasure? What do we value the most? That naturally brings me to Big Cove. And I have a question for you. What do you think are the top treasures of Big Cove? What do we value the most? Call them out. What do we value in Big Cove the most? Each other. Relationships, right? Okay. What else? What do we value?
Our outreach.
Outreach. What else?
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary. What else? What do you value here? What is the value? So we have just testimonies we're talking a little bit ago and last week. What do we value here? Worship. Okay. Good. What else we value? Mission, which is different than outreach. Mission are the goods and services that we provide to people in need, and outreach is making relationships outside with the community and with our missional partners. So they are different. Anything else that we value? Our gifts. Excellent. We value our gifts given to us from God. Gifts from God. Yes, Tom?
Caring.
Caring. We value the caring here, don't we?
Both inside and outside.
Right, inside and outside the walls. We value the fact that we care for each other and we care for those outside the walls. Excellent. So caring. Anything else at all? Okay. Remember what we said earlier. Jesus wants us to understand what people treasure becomes their guiding light in their whole life. Be guided by your heart, he says. What we treasure as a church collectively will become our guiding light here. Our vision is printed on the back of your bulletin, and it's our roadmap to the future. Next month, as Sally said, our church session will be gathering to adopt a budget for the 2025 church calendar year. And we need a budget that supports what we value, what our treasures are. What are our treasures? So the budget supports the vision that guides us, and our vision has our core values written all over it, our treasure. We're all part of this vision with the sharing of our resources, people sharing their time, sharing their gifts, sharing their talent, sharing their earthly treasures. And every member of this body needs to invest in some way in order for the whole body to shine God's light. We were commanded by God to create disciples and share the good news. And for this to happen, we need to know what we value, don't we? What we value and where our heart lies. And where God guides the church, we need to know what we value. So, together, let's read our vision statement that has our values written all over it. Let's read it together out loud. The back of your bulletin, the bottom one. You ready? Let's read it together. Big Cove Presbyterian Church is called to glorify God through vital worship, provide family to all, meet people where they are on their faith journey, be an intentional presence in the community, and shine the light of God to the world. It's right there. What you said without looking at that vision statement, the values that you have are in our vision, our God-guided vision, and we didn't even look at it to know our values. That, my friends, is incredibly beautiful and signifies that we have a church that is small, but man, are we mighty. We're mighty. And we're thankful for so many of our blessings, incredible blessings. And one of the things I would like to participate in right now is another blessing. We have a special day tomorrow, and I'd like all the veterans in the room to please stand. Oh, how wonderful. They're doing it. He's getting there. Oh, wonderful. Oh, my goodness. And tell me which branches of service. Can we just do that? Branches of service? Army? Army? Army?
Navy.
Navy? Army? Who else did I miss over here? Army? Jimmy? Army?
And the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard. Isn't that amazing? So thank you all for your service. Just wonderful. Thank you.